Welcome back, parents. So I realized that there's a whole lot more to be said about rivalry between our children. We call it sibling rivalry. Hopefully you've listened to my first video on that. And if you haven't, I encourage you to, I will put the link here to go and listen to that first video. So I did that video and then began to think about the different other circumstances where either we created this rivalry by omission or by commission, or whether it was just something that was happening amongst the children or between the children if there's just two of them. So today I wanted to talk about two main areas, perhaps three, if I have the time. And the first one is when, I think I talked about that a bit before, when we parents play favorites amongst our children. Sometimes it's subtle and we're doing it unintentionally. Sometimes we're actually doing it purposefully. We could say we're using it to engender some healthy competition. In other words, your sister does it like this, why don't you do it like this as well? But the children hear it differently. The children hear it as you preferring the other person. When you're referring to the other person's way of doing things, it means in their mind, that person is better, more favored by you than they are. So you want to be very careful. I gave an example of what's going on in my family up till now. My two brothers, even though they are old men in their own rights, are still in, a place of rivalry that makes me really sad. It makes our mom very, very sad because, we call it rivalry, but as they grow older, it becomes more of hatred than it is rivalry. It's not rivalry, or rivalry then grows to become hatred. Probably watch some movie where even siblings kill the other because they want to prove a point, or because the parent prefers that one. And it's happened it started a long time ago. It's just not now. It started between Cain and Abel to the point that Cain killed Abel. So it's not something new. But I'm hoping that we as parents can be more intentional about how we bring our children up and understand that these things happen between siblings, even when we're not doing anything deliberately to make it happen. In my case, my dad made it happen deliberately. Even my mom cannot be totally exonerated from it. And I'll give the instances as I go on. I'm a girl. I mean, we're seven of us, but I'm the girl between two boys. So there's an older brother and a younger brother. And so I'm sort of like in the middle. And growing up, I would hear my dad, he didn't even hide it, show vivid preference to the boys than to me as a girl. So there were, I don't know if you, in my generation, may have experienced it as well. I would hear him say things like, no, boys do that. No, girls don't do that. Go into the kitchen. Girls belong in the kitchen and stuff like that. And at one point, I might have been about 7 or 8, I said to him, I said, girls can do what boys can do even better. First, I asked him, I said, why do you prefer the boys to me? And he said, because they're boys. And I said, do you know that girls can do greater things, better things, even, than the boys? And he laughed. But you see, that for a long time, that was in my heart. And I lived in competition. And I think that's still happening today because the people that I work with, the students that I work with, even some adults that I work with, that are still living with that baggage that they started with as kids. I lived in competition. I made sure I was better than my brothers in school. I, struggled to have top grades, but it was very depressing that every time I came home, even with top grades, my dad, it wasn't enough to impress my dad, as opposed to how I felt, the boys, even without trying, got his approval. So the children are constantly seeking, constantly looking for approval. They're constantly looking to be told and to be appreciated as being enough. But when we as parents, and mind you, even without us doing anything, there's bound to be competition. It's a natural thing. But I think as parents, our role is to help them see themselves as unique individuals and help them understand that there's no basis for comparison. There is no basis for comparison. So while I, leave it at that, the more ideas come up on how to help, I will do more videos. But let me talk about when parents intentionally do this. When we intentionally play favorites. And this is a very sneaky one, it can be subtle, but it's real. And this is when sometimes we compare the children to ourselves. So we say things like, you're just like your dad, or, you do it the way I do it. Now, sometimes when you say the way I do it, if you're the one saying it, the children will find that complimentary, especially if you have a good relationship with that child. But when you say you're just like your dad, or you spoke like your dad, or you speak like your dad, or you do this like your dad, if there's you and that person, you being the mother now, and the dad, if there's a problem in that relationship, that will not be complimentary. The child will receive that as a criticism. The child will see that as you putting them down, and not just them down, but their father as well. And no matter what is going on between you and their dad, you always want to remember that the dad will always be the dad to that child. I mean, the worst behaved man in the world, the child still see their dads as blameless, And if they're going to apportion the blame later, if they grow up and begin to see the perhaps character flaws in their father, they should be the one to draw the conclusion, not you selling it to them. But I think a lot of us mothers, and trust me, I'm not making any judgments. Why? Because I'm a divorcee myself. So I understand that, sometimes we carry on our bitterness against the other person. And it could be the other way around. It could be the mom as well, who, the father has a custody, or the children are with the father. And then he makes references to, you're just like your mom. You just speak like your mom. That's exactly how your mom would do it. That's exactly how. But you're not saying it in a complimentary way. You're saying it derogatively, but you're not putting down just the child this time. You're also putting down the mother, or you're also putting down the father. And that has a very negative effect on a child's psyche. So we want to be very careful. And obviously, there could be strains in the relationship, there could be issues in the relationship, but we want to be careful not to transfer that aggression, because that's what it's called, transferred aggression, to the children whose fault is not, the fault is not theirs, that you two are not getting along anymore. They came along when you were getting along. So we shouldn't pass it on to them. And if you're going to say that a child does something like their dad, or I still say that, but my kids know when I say that now, that I'm saying it, even though their dad and I are not together, but I'm saying it in a complimentary way. Because regardless of what's happening between their dad and me, regardless of the fact that we couldn't, be together anymore, there's certain things that I admire about him, that I admired before I married him. Until today, I still admire. And so what I try to do, and don't get me wrong, this was difficult for me as well, because you tend to nurse that bitterness for a while, and you tend to, in a way, putting that person down, you see as a way of justifying yourself, or as it's like a student gives a student effect. But again, that's usually when we're still not spiritually matured. When we become spiritually matured, we understand that you don't become taller by putting someone else down. Right? I grew to understand that. Don't get me wrong. So I'm not judging you. If you're still bitter, and that's something I could help you with. If you're still angry and still bitter and you're afraid that you're passing it on to your child, get in touch and let's see how we can help you with that. Okay? Because it's possible to be in disagreement, but to live in peace, or to be in peace with that person for the sake of your children. All right. All right. So the other point I wanted to say, I'm not sure I still have time yet. Let me quickly say this and then I'll close with that and perhaps come back and talk more about it, because this is a really, really important issue. The sibling rivalry. I don't know for how long I'll keep the series going, but it's really important. Important because I know it affects every family. If you say your family is not impacted by sibling rivalry of some form or the other, you're lying. All right. So it's a big issue. And tell me, use the comment section to tell me how, I can help, what area you would like me to speak with as far as this is concerned. So I want to talk about the children of circumstances. Yeah. Children of circumstances. I probably, made a reference, earlier on about when there's issues between the mom and the dad, and there's relationship, there's friction in that relationship, and how it can impact the children. The other point is when the children I call the children of circumstances are children that maybe the Jabez's, let me call them that, the Jabez children. The Bible tells us in that First Chronicles about the woman that had a child, in pain, in sorrow. We weren't really told the circumstances that made her sorrowful, made her painful. It could be that the birth itself was very difficult. And I had a very difficult birth with my first and second child. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we tend to transfer, the pain that we experienced having those children to them without even realizing. Because I know that with my second child, I had that issue. For the first few months, I couldn't even show him tenderness because psychologically, I was really going through a lot of pain from a near-death experience. So it's almost as if his birth took me to a place of death, and God revived me, and it took time to get out of that mental state to be able to relate lovingly with my child, right? And that can happen with many of us. Sometimes some of us have children who maybe soon after they were born, you found that they were in the autism spectrum, and bringing them up and raising them was just so difficult. Yeah. Sometimes that can impact the way you relate to them. And the other children, the atypical children, would then perhaps it could happen either way. Either the atypical children get more attention, and these other children who are in the spectrum feel neglected and they can't express it, or is the other way around. The children on the spectrum who naturally need more attention get that to the detriment of the atypical children who now feel, well, all mom's attention is on so-and-so because they love them more. I'm going to tell you a story next week about how one of my children thought that I loved the other more, and they asked me a question. And I want to know if you've ever heard your child ask you that question, or maybe they haven't asked, but they're thinking about it, and how you can help them ask that question, or even answer it before they ask it. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop at this point. There's a little more to be said about children of circumstances, but I'll come back because I don't want this, videos to be very long. So I will come back and talk about those children of circumstances and how their circumstance affect the way we relate to them without realizing what we're doing, and how that impacts the children for life. All right, stay with me and watch out for my next video. By the way, remember to like, share, and use the comment section. All right, thank you. God bless. Bye now.